It's like I would imagine a good chunk of people that have bought my books and your books and started out the year trying to think about New Year's resolutions have already quit on them. And like we did this New Year, New You challenge thing for Daily Stoic, and it's 21 days, and it's like, the first email, it's like 100% open rate, then the next one it's like 90, then 80, and by the end, something that people paid for, they're at like 40% open rates after 3 weeks. So it's amazing to me how it's like we start out with really clear intentions, but we can't follow through.
Yeah, it's so common, so true. I also I've had this happen to me many times. It's not like I'm immune to the phenomenon. Like, we all get excited and amped up about things early on, and then it comes time to execute, and life happens, and things like taper off. This is what you're kind of getting at, though. This whole discussion about New Year's resolutions. This is one of the central things I talk about in Atomic Habits. Is this idea of like starting with identity rather than results. Mm-hmm. And I do think there's something to that like at the beginning of the year, people are very excited about the results they can imagine for themselves, losing weight or making more money or, meditating every day or whatever. But they still don't see themselves in that way. They don't consider themselves to be a meditator or a writer or an athlete or whatever, the type of person who doesn't miss workouts. And so I usually encourage people to start there. Like, start with the identity that you want to have, or start with the lifestyle that you want to live, and then start doing small habits that reinforce that identity, rather than just being like, oh, I'm going to lose 40 pounds. And then when that doesn't happen in 3 weeks, you inevitably feel, demotivated.
Well, that's something that they talk a lot about in sports. So people have heard about it 1,000 times, and we pay lip service to it. But then in our own lives, we don't actually follow it, which is a New Year's resolution. The problem with that is that you are starting with the result. I want to lose 40 pounds. I want to learn. I want to know Spanish. Like, you're picking a thing and you're saying, I want to get that result. When really what you're talking about identity, you're also talking about process. It should be, I want to eat better meals on a daily basis, as opposed to I want to get a certain thing, or I want to write a book is not the right goal. It should be, I'm going to start writing. Like, it's doing the thing versus focusing on the outcome.
Well, and this is kind of one of the, discoveries I had as I was working on the book and writing about the topic more, is that when you stick to the process, like you're saying right now, when you like perform habits consistently, every action you take is like a vote for the type of person you want to become. And so by doing those habits, you're casting these little votes for the type of person that you are, the identity that you believe you have. You're sort of reinforcing that internal narrative. And so by building small habits, by sticking to the process, you are in that moment reinforcing that identity. And ultimately, once you get to that point where you say, hey, actually, I've done this enough times, I think this is part of my story. Like, I am a basketball player, or I am a meditator, or I am a writer, or whatever it is. You're no longer pursuing behavior change at that point, because you're not trying to be someone new. You're just acting in alignment with the type of person you see yourself to be. And, you're a great example of this as, say, someone who has the identity of a writer or an author. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean the task of writing is easy for you, or that it doesn't require any effort, but the act of writing every day is in alignment with how you view yourself. The internal narrative of I'm an author or I'm a writer, you're not like trying to convince yourself, or in the case of many habits or New Year's resolutions, people say things like, I need to get motivated, or I need to get amped up, or like I need the willpower to do it. And like, you don't necessarily need to get motivated to be a writer. You already view yourself in that way. Now, you still need to stick to the habit. You still need to do the work, but I think it's the work takes on a different characteristic at that point, once you start to identify as the type of person who does that consistently.
And it's sort of paradoxical. So I get why it's hard for people to understand. Like, you hear Bill Belichick or someone talk about the process, and you're like, but you've won the most games out of anyone. Or in Zen and the Art of Archery, he talks about, put the target out of your mind. What's the point of archery if you're not aiming at the target, right? So it feels insane, and that's probably why people have resistance to it. And I think where I've come down is like, okay, obviously having goals is better than someone who has no goals. But then it's like, once you have the goal, philosophically, you get to a place where the goal becomes not important. So it's a weird contradiction that you're asking people to wrap their heads around.
Well, and I kind of feel like if you really care about the goal, you'll focus on the system. Like if you actually care about getting the result, which supposedly is what we all are doing this for, the archer is trying to hit the bullseye, the football player is trying to win the championship, and so on. Supposedly results matter so much and we care so much about them. And this is coming, by the way, from someone who is very results oriented. Like I've kind of had to, like do therapy on myself or whatever to get myself to focus on the process more and not be so hung up on the outcome. But if you do care about the outcome so much, then you need to focus on the system and the process, because that's how you actually achieve it. And furthermore, being outcome focused will help you achieve a goal one time. But if you want to keep winning again and again, you have to be focused on the system. And so goals are good for one-time wins. Systems are for people who want to win repeatedly. And I feel like that's kind of where how I think about the distinction between the two.
Yeah, what's that joke where it's like once you're lucky, twice you have good systems, or twice you're good. It's like doing it once is easy, or it can be random. But if you're trying to replicate it, there needs to be some sort of process.
Right.
And I'd be curious too, as an author, like, again, this goes to the sports thing, is you want your book to be successful. No one writes a book and then they hope nobody reads it. But then they also, the place this process comes in, Marcus Aurelius talks about this. He goes like, sanity is tying your happiness to your own actions. Like if your goal on your book, you can't really have a system that guarantees you too much of the external results. Like you can't have a system that is going to make your book a #1 New York Times bestseller. You can have a system that should generate a good book. Right. You can have the system to focus on the parts that are in your control. And then you also have to get to a place where you write off the parts that are not in your control as being much less consequential.
Yeah. I kind of think about it like you have things that you don't control at all, the weather, for example. Then you have things that you influence, but you don't control them. Like if you're playing someone in tennis, you can influence the outcome. You can't control how they play or where they hit their shots or whatever. And then you have things that you're like fully under your control, what you choose to wear today or whatever. And most of the things that really matter in life fall in the middle category. You can influence them, but you can't totally control them. And so at some point, at least for myself, like with writing Atomic Habits, I had to kind of be at peace with the effort that I put in or something. Like I didn't want to get to the end of it, depending on how you measure it, it took somewhere between 3 to 5 years to finish the book.
Your whole life.
And I didn't want to get to the end of that process and feel like I hadn't given the best effort I could. Now, I hoped it would do well and hit a bestsellers list and sell a bunch of copies and all that, but I can't control that. But I just wanted to feel like I had influenced every bit of that process that I could. And then, then we'll see what happens. And, there's always something more you could have done, but I'm at peace with the effort I gave, and I feel like that was probably the most important thing for me. And then the fact that it has worked out well, just makes it all feel much better afterward.
Yeah, that's the extra. But I mean, imagine if you'd gotten the results, but you knew that it wasn't as good. Like, that's a weird position to be in that I've been in at different times in my life. And I'm sure you've seen it with articles or something where you did a pretty good job, but it wasn't like your best.
Yeah.
There's a weirdness to it. I mean, you still enjoy
well,
it.
There's something about
nice.
There's something about the struggle that makes the outcome more, enjoyable. Like I think about, imagine if you had spent your whole career, you played football as a kid and through high school and college, and you're finally like the kicker on the Super Bowl winning team and you kick the field goal to win the game. And how that would feel after spending 25 years of your life dedicated toward that goal, versus being like a professional soccer player and then you retire and you're like, hey, you know what? I might try out for a team. And then turns out you can be the kicker and then the starter gets hurt and you end up kicking the game-winning field goal in the Super Bowl. And it's like, it would still be really cool, but I don't know that it would be the same because you don't have the struggle before it. And so there needs to be some kind of, the height of your joy is tied to the depth of your sorrow in that sense. And the more effort that you put in, the better it feels when you do have some success.